Hi folks, hope you enjoyed your week of fall break and doing things a little bit differently. Obviously I didn't do any lecturing last week. We let some other philosophically minded people do some talking. We'll be back to the usual this week, so we're reading some John Locke. He's going to continue in the trend of looking at these interrelated issues that we sort of started with Descartes. So he's worried about a couple of things. He's worried about, first, sort of tangentially about the proof for God and what role God might play in the world. This is obviously a big concern of sort of the late Middle Ages, early Renaissance. And he's also really concerned about evidence and sort of how and to what extent we can or should trust our senses. Now, Locke you might have heard of. He's probably most famous for his political writing. He wrote 2 treatises on government, and those are where the ideas of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness come from, though he called it Life, Liberty, and Property. The authors of the Declaration pretty much just plagiarized that wholesale from Locke. So Locke's kind of a big deal to Americans. We're reading something different. We're reading his theory of perception, so he's going to talk a lot about the senses and what we can know. This will, again, continue in Descartes' trend. So some of the big questions are, what's really out there in the world, and by contrast, what things are sort of all in our heads, and further, do we know anything innately without sort of reference to the rest of the world? So Locke wants to talk about what he's going to call the understanding, and you can think of this sort of like our mind. And so the understanding, he says, is what makes humans unique. Nothing else on the planet has the understanding, and of course science might challenge us now, but we'll give it to him. So intuitively, right, we could think that, so what is it that makes us unique from all the other animals out there? Well, we can think, we can deliberate, we can reflect, we can question, we can wonder, we can wish, things like this, right, that it seems like, even really smart animals can't necessarily, have a reasonable debate or something like that. And so Locke wonders a few things. He wonders, well, all right, so how does this understanding thing work? What sorts of things does it deal with? What should I use it for? And by contrast, what shouldn't I use it for? What should I just give up on trying to understand? So part of his project is to find what our limits are. And he thinks that our limits aren't just, sort of random. They don't just come out of nowhere. Locke is, again, a Christian in his day. And so he says that our faculties are limited by God to what would actually be useful for us. So our faculties are, obviously they have limits, right? We can't understand everything, we can't see everything, hear everything, know everything. But he says those limits are the bounds of what we actually need to see, hear, know, etc. We might think, right, and this is something we could talk about on a discussion board, maybe he gets it backward here, right? Maybe we only think that it's limited to what's useful for us because we have no idea how useful things we can't do would be. Something just to wonder about. So as a result, he says, when we find our limits, we should just stop there. We should be content. We shouldn't try to push past them, both because we can't and because it wouldn't be useful for us anyway. We might wonder about that too on the discussion board, especially given sort of genetic enhancement and possibilities like that. So Locke wants to talk about the understanding, about what goes on in our minds, and he says the basic unit in the understanding is an idea. And an idea, he says, is basically an image or a picture. It's a sort of individual instance of some sense experience. So you might think, right, not all ideas are pictures, right? Some might be smells or sounds or something like that. But they're quite simple, they're quite individual. He'll spell out a lot of what this means later on. And so ideas are the stuff that we think about in our minds using the understanding. And they can be combined or changed or examined by the mind in all sorts of ways, right? So if I combine my ideas of red and round and sweet, and of course some other ones, I get an apple, for say. Similarly, I could break a more complicated idea down, right? So my idea of a rose might be red and smelly, or nice smelling if you want to be kinder, right? You could also examine particular ideas. You could say, well, maybe you never thought explicitly about it, but so picture a dragon in your head. And now think, all right, well, how many legs does that dragon have? Right? It might be 2, it might be 4, it might be none. You can examine your ideas and sort of find out more about them. So Locke's going to wonder, do we have any ideas innately? Do we have them without any experience in the world? An innate idea is one that we never have to go see anything, find anything to know. And these could be either just natural because of our biology, or maybe God put them there. Locke's going to say no, we don't have any innate ideas at all. We are what he calls a tabula rasa, which is a blank slate. So in the next video, we will show a couple of ways that he wants to reject this idea and then where he's going to go from there.